Imagine a 95-year-old man lying in a hospital bed breathing his final breaths, a life well lived full of stories, wisdom, and memories. But just as the darkness closes in, something miraculous happens. He returns, not just from death, but with a divine mission from Jesus Christ himself. A message so urgent that it could change the course of human history. What could possibly bring someone back from the other side? And why would a man, so close to the end of his life, be chosen to deliver such a powerful message? Get ready for a story that defies reason and brings a message of faith, redemption, and hope to all of humanity. Henry McAllister had always been a humble man. At 95, he lived alone in a small, modest home in a quiet corner of Michigan. His neighbors knew him as a man of faith, always helping others, giving what he could to those in need, and sharing his wisdom with younger generations. Henry had seen a lot in his lifetime: wars, technological revolutions, the rise and fall of empires. He'd lived through it all. But now, in the twilight of his years, Henry was ready to embrace the quiet peace that death promised. His body was frail, his heart had slowed, and his spirit had begun to fade. He had no regrets. He had lived a full life, loved and lost, and had found solace in his faith. However, fate had other plans. It was a cold winter night when Henry's heart gave out. His body, too old and weary to withstand the toll of age, finally stopped. The doctors worked feverishly, but it was clear Henry McAllister had died. His family gathered around, devastated by the loss but comforted by the belief that he had lived a good life. But what they didn't know was that something extraordinary was unfolding. Henry's spirit rose from his lifeless body, and for a moment, he found himself suspended in darkness. Then, as if summoned by an unseen force, a light appeared, a brilliant light, more radiant than anything he had ever seen. And standing in the light, with arms open wide, was Jesus Christ. "You have come to the end of your time, Henry," Jesus spoke, his voice calm but filled with the power of eternal truth. "But you are not finished. I have a mission for you." Henry, overwhelmed by the sheer presence of Jesus, struggled to speak. "A mission? But I am old. My life is behind me. Why me?" "Because," Jesus said, his gaze intense, "your life has been a reflection of the love and grace I have shown to humanity. You have served your purpose well, but now I need you to serve in a greater way." Henry fell to his knees, a flood of emotions coursing through him. "What is it that you need me to do, Lord?" Jesus extended his hand. "I need you to go back to warn the people of Earth. The world has lost its way. Humanity is teetering on the edge of destruction, consumed by hatred, greed, and division. I need you to spread a message of love, compassion, and unity. The time is running out, Henry." Henry's heart pounded. He had always known that the world was in trouble, but to hear it from Jesus himself was terrifying. "But I'm just one man. How can I make a difference?" "You are not alone," Jesus reassured him. "I will guide you. Your message will not just be your own, it will be mine. Go and do not fear. You have been chosen for this purpose." With that, the light around Henry began to grow brighter, and he felt himself being pulled back toward his body. Henry's eyes snapped open. The sterile white walls of the hospital room greeted him as if nothing had changed, but everything had. His body, once frail and worn, felt revitalized. His heart, which had stopped moments ago, was now beating strong, and his mind, oh his mind, was filled with clarity, as though the weight of years had been lifted from him. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his chest, and he collapsed back onto the bed. His family gasped, their eyes wide with disbelief as they rushed to his side. His son, Michael, was the first to speak. Dad, are you okay? You were dead just minutes ago. We saw." Henry's lips curved into a faint smile, though it wasn't one of joy. It was the smile of a man who had seen the light, touched the divine, and been entrusted with something sacred. "I'm fine, Michael. Better than fine." The words hung in the air, mysterious, unsettling, but undeniably true. As Henry's family marveled at his sudden revival, he couldn't shake the vision that still filled his mind, the light, the voice of Jesus, the heavy burden of the mission he had given him. "Dad, you've been given a second chance," Michael said, his voice trembling with awe and concern. "We thought we'd lost you. How is this possible?" Henry looked at his son, then at the rest of his family, his daughter, his grandchildren, all of them staring at him like he was some sort of miracle. "It's not about me. It's about the message." The weeks that followed Henry's return were a blur of disbelief and wonder. His family, initially overwhelmed by the miracle of his revival, soon noticed something else, a fire in his eyes, a sense of purpose that had never been there before. Henry had always been a man of quiet faith, but now it was as if he carried a divine urgency within him. He began to speak of his time in the afterlife, not with fear or confusion, but with a sense of certainty that left no room for doubt. He spoke of the vision he had seen of Jesus Christ, who had appeared to him in a blinding light and entrusted him with a message. Jesus said the world is lost, Henry told his family one evening as they gathered around the dinner table. People are too focused on their differences, on hate, greed, and division. There's no time left. He wants me to tell everyone, love one another as I have loved you. His family listened in stunned silence, unsure whether to believe him or dismiss it as a hallucination. But Henry's eyes, those clear, steady eyes, convinced them this wasn't a delusion. This was something far more profound. Take a moment to think about what Henry has just learned. A man, nearly at the end of his life, is given a second chance to deliver a message from Jesus himself. A message about love, unity, and redemption. Can you feel the weight of this mission? Like this story, and subscribe for more tales of transformation, faith, and divine intervention. Let us know in the comments below how you think the message of love could change the world, and what steps you're taking in your own life to spread peace and compassion. Together, we can be the change the world needs. Henry's mission wasn't easy. The world, in many ways, had grown numb. People were skeptical of miracles. They were cautious of anything that seemed too good to be true, especially in a time when division was at an all-time high. Still, Henry pressed on. He began speaking at local churches, gathering small groups of people to hear his story. At first, it was just his family and a few close friends who listened. But soon, word spread. He shared the details of his experience with Jesus in a way that resonated deeply with those who were open to faith. It wasn't about the miracle, it was about the message that love was the answer to all of humanity's problems. However, not everyone was receptive. Henry faced ridicule from the secular world. Media outlets mocked him as a man lost in his old age and questioned his sanity. But Henry wasn't deterred. His mission was clear. He had seen the truth, and he had to share it. As he continued his journey, he began to reach more people who had lost faith, people who had given up on humanity. His message began to resonate with those who had been struggling to make sense of a world filled with hate and division. Slowly but surely, the seeds of change were planted. The more Henry spoke, the more people began to listen. He wasn't just preaching from the pulpit, he was living his message. He helped the homeless, fed the hungry, and visited prisons. He didn't care about fame or recognition. All he cared about was spreading love for one another, love for God, and love for the world itself. Henry's story and message began to spread beyond the small communities where he had started. News outlets that had once ridiculed him now began to take notice. The secular world, still skeptical, couldn't deny the ripple effects of his work. The message of unity and love was catching on. Political leaders who had once been divided began to talk about healing. Religious leaders from all faiths began to join Henry's call for unity and peace. As Henry's movement grew, it sparked a wave of change. People who had once been divided by race, religion, or political beliefs began to work together. Schools incorporated lessons on love and unity into their curricula. Communities came together to solve problems, not by fighting, but by working in collaboration. The world wasn't perfect. There were still struggles, challenges, and conflicts. But the shift was undeniable. Henry's message had sparked something powerful within people's hearts. They had begun to see each other as human beings, not enemies. And Henry, though frail and aging, continued to lead by example. He traveled across the country, speaking in churches, schools, and town halls. His message was simple: love your neighbor as yourself. It didn't matter who you were, where you came from, or what you believed. Love was the key to healing the wounds of the world. When Henry McAllister passed away at the age of, his family gathered around him in quiet reverence. There were no grand funeral processions, no lavish tributes. Instead, the people who loved him reflected on the profound and lasting impact he had made, not just in his family's lives, but across the entire world. They knew his life had been one of extraordinary purpose, shaped by the message of love, unity, and peace that had echoed across the world for decades. Henry's final moments were peaceful, almost as if he had completed the mission he had been given. He had no more work left to do. But his death wasn't an end. It was a continuation of a legacy that would live on in the hearts of all who had heard his story and been touched by his words. As news of Henry's passing spread, tributes poured in from all corners of the globe, in small towns, large cities, and across countries. People came together to honor a man they had never met, but whose message had transformed their lives. Those who had been touched by his teachings began to share stories of how they had found peace, forgiveness, and a sense of unity in a world that had once seemed divided. His words had healed wounds, repaired broken relationships, and mended the fabric of communities that had once seemed irreparably torn. Churches, schools, and organizations dedicated memorials in his honor, but Henry would have never wanted any of that. He would have simply wanted people to continue living out the message he had carried, a message of love and understanding that transcended all boundaries. In the years following his death, Henry's message continued to spread. His name became synonymous with kindness and reconciliation. Across political and religious divides, people began to see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow human beings. What had once seemed impossible, true unity, was becoming a reality in communities where hatred and mistrust had once reigned. Henry's influence was especially felt in the younger generations, who looked to him as a model of what it meant to live a life of purpose. His example taught them that no matter how old you were, no matter how many years you had left, you could still make a difference. His story was a testament to the power of love to overcome even the deepest divisions. In churches and faith communities, people read Henry's story and saw it as a living example of Christ's teachings. Pastors and priests cited Henry's life in their sermons, reminding congregations that they too were called to love and serve, to reach out to those in need, and to spread the message of Christ's unconditional love to a hurting world. 1 year after Henry's passing, a group of his former colleagues and fellow activists decided to honor him with an annual event, the Love Across Borders Symposium. The event brought together people from all walks of life, community leaders, activists, teachers, and citizens, to discuss ways to foster love, compassion, and unity across cultures, nations, and backgrounds. It was a living testament to Henry's belief that true change began with the individual, with the power of one person to inspire others. As people gathered at the symposium, they shared stories of how Henry had changed their lives. From a young woman in Europe who had been struggling with depression to a former political leader who had found common ground with his enemies, the stories were as diverse as the people who told them. But they all shared one common thread: Henry's message had transformed them. Though Henry was no longer with them in body, his spirit continued to guide them. They carried his message with them every day, through their actions, their words, and their choices. They knew that the love Henry spoke of wasn't just a lofty ideal, it was something that could be lived out in every moment by everyone. It was a love that healed, that brought people together, and that transcended all of the world's divisions. As the years passed, the memory of Henry McAllister continued to inspire countless individuals, communities, and movements dedicated to peace, compassion, and unity. The world wasn't perfect, but it was better. The message Henry carried was never truly his own. It had come from Jesus Christ himself, passed through the hands of an ordinary man who had been chosen to share it. Henry had not just been a vessel for divine wisdom, he had been a living example of what it meant to live out that wisdom every day. His legacy was not one of grand gestures or sweeping changes. It was a legacy of small, everyday acts of love that, when combined, created a movement that changed the course of history. Now the message is in your hands. Henry's story is not just one of resurrection. It's a reminder that no matter who we are or how old we are, we all have a part to play in changing the world. Can you imagine what the world would look like if we all lived as Henry did? If we all embraced the love, unity, and peace that Jesus Christ spoke of? What if we began right here, right now, to spread kindness, to heal wounds, to unite the broken pieces of society? Like this story if you believe in the power of love to heal the world. Comment below on how Henry's story has impacted you and what steps you can take to spread love in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, faith, and transformation. One person can make a difference. Will you be the one?